Thanks to ZocDoc for supporting Unregistered. With ZocDoc, you can search for local doctors who accept your insurance, read verified patient reviews, and book an appointment either in person or by video chat. Go to ZocDoc.com/renegade and download the ZocDoc app to sign up for free and book a top-rated doctor. This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. This is a show about ideas, people, and behaviors that are considered inappropriate, out of bounds, or beyond the pale. The things you're not supposed to talk about if you're a school teacher, a college professor, a businessman, a politician, a parent, a neighbor, or even a podcast host. These are the things you're not supposed to say or even think if you're a good liberal, a good conservative, or a good citizen. Each week, I'll interview a person who has something bad to say. They might be a journalist or a professor. They might be a porn star or a drug dealer. They might just be an ordinary person with an ordinary job who doesn't care about the rules of polite society. I'm not interested in breaking the rules just to be a troublemaker. I'm interested in people who break the rules of conventional thought and to expand the scope of what is possible to say in our society. I'm interested in people who make me think. My guest this week holds the distinction of being the only philosopher in the world to be officially sanctioned by the United States government. He is sanctioned because he is considered to be the leading intellectual behind the global nationalist populist movement that is threatening to take over governments across Europe and the United States, and he is known as Vladimir Putin's mind. This is my interview with Alexander Dugin. I am joined from Moscow by Professor Alexander Dugin, one of the most famous people who's been on the show, but who's not very well known to my American audience, which is most of my audience. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, Professor Dugin, because there is a lot that is said about you in this country, although not much that is said that is knowledgeable. Very few people have actually read your work in this country. Very few people even talk about you now. But when they do, it is in terms that describe you essentially as a monster who is responsible for some of the worst political movements and phenomena on the planet of the last 5 to 6 years. You're quite a demon in the American mind, at least in the intelligentsia's mind in America. And when I discovered your work, your ideas, I was fascinated by the deliberate misrepresentations of your work in American media and politics. But mostly I was impressed by the complexity and how it all fits together. You have ideas about Russia and Russian politics and Russian history, of course. You have ideas about the relationship between the West and Russia. But then you have ideas about philosophy and a particular epistemology. And all those things fit together into a very beautiful system, I think, a beautiful philosophical system that, whether you agree with it or not, should be respected and understood as this machine that works together, I think, almost like a clock does. I mean, to me, it's almost reminiscent of Marxism in that way, in that it's a total cosmology that pulls together many different spheres of human life in one way of understanding it. So let's go through this. I mean, that's quite an introduction I just gave you, but you begin, in a sense, by calling out the relationship between the West historically and in the present time and Russia as being one of, this is not new among Russian thinkers, but as one of being essentially a relationship of an oppressive imperialist force on the one hand in the West, and Russia on the other hand, who is perpetually, and this is the word you use, and I love that you use this word, perpetually othered, presented as the other who cannot be understood and should not be understood and must simply be removed or replaced. So I guess we can start there. That's a big introduction, but take any part of that you would like to begin with.
So thank you for your very nice introduction. So you're speaking with Demon for the West, but to be Demon for the modern or postmodern liberal West is almost equal, almost the same as to be said for the rest of the world, for all other civilizations that contest universality of modern or postmodern Western liberal epistemology, and to be something like a saint or some kind of authority for those in the West who as well reject this postmodern liberal globalist agenda. And that is not small portion of population, I think. We saw in the Trump adventures, Trump's adventures, how the half of the United States was mobilized in order to vote the alternative to this normal universal system represented by Democrats, by Biden. So the half of American population doesn't accept that. And in Europe, there are so many conservative, leftist, rightist, populist movements that as well challenge this status quo ideology. So it is, I'm not, and for all of kind of the people, I'm at least ally or the point of reference or some kind of leader, because I accept the role to be demon for modern liberal globalist swamp, and I really challenge that. So in all aspects, I'm not against some secondary details of what is going on. I'm against the modern Western civilization that is and was wrong from the very beginning, modern, from beginning of the modernity, because according to my analysis, in the beginning of modernity, the West has cut its own classical roots. So that was the great departure from identity, from Western classical Mediterranean Greco-Roman culture. And modernity was a mistake and crime. Modernity from very beginning. And now we are witnesses of the ending modernity. So modernity has accomplished its own agenda and has achieved its goal. And why the world we are living in is so terrible? Because it is perfect and complete realization of agenda of this perverted thing that Western modernity that has colonized everybody else. In the time of the so-called great geographical discoveries, and we and all other ancient and very special culture and civil cultures and civilization, we were and are victims of this colonization. But it is not all. The modernity has colonized the past of the West itself. That was double sense colonization, geographical and historical, and only moderns could from some moment judge the past, judge the history, judge the religion, judge the tradition, judge what was good or wrong, resembling the modernity or different from modernity. And that was the unique criteria. So that was the catastrophe. And in that, I'm not only in tune with Russian Slavophiles, anti-Western tradition of conservative philosophers, but as well, I'm totally in tune with Western traditionalists, conservative, with Platonics, with all the tendency of Western culture, philosophy, Western, not Russian, that as well regarded and still regard the Western modernity as a failure, as mistake and crime. The same Heidegger, the same Nietzsche. So it is not just the Russian point of view. It is not just the Russian voice. It is something much, much broader. And that is why I think they really hate me. Those I hate me, and that is logical. So I'm rather pleased to be the demon of liberal, globalist, individualist, hyper-individualist, postmodern civilization.
Absolutely. You pose an existential threat to them. Of course they hate you and consider you a demon. You are a demon to them. Now, modernity. I am, at the very least, a skeptic of modernity. I'm not sure I have as thoroughgoing a critique as you do of it, but you call it a catastrophic mistake. How on earth? Again, you're speaking mostly to Americans on this show. Most Americans will have no idea what you mean by this. And in fact, they will think that you can't mean anything serious by it. I know you do, but just keep that in mind. What parts of modernity do you find to be so objectionable? Or why is it that modernity specifically to you has been a catastrophe?
The modernity is based on some principles. It is not just the new time, because time is always new. So 1 second before was old, and now we are in another second that is new. So modernity is not about a kind of mechanical time. It is the paradigm. It is epistemology.
Right.
And this modern epistemology is based on the idea that nothing is sacred, that there is only matter, there's only outside world, and all the inner experiences of human is just a reflection of the world outside of us. That is materialism, that is mechanical physics, that is idea that the things are moving by themselves or by some inertia, by impulses, by forces that are totally external to the things themselves. And the human being is just the reflection of this material universe. That was Newton's vision. They recognized in the beginning of the modernity, in the early modernity as well, the God as clockworker, a mechanical God, a God or some creator, someone who adjusts the system in order to function properly, but all that is external. So human subject was reduced to reflection, and that was the end of the Christianity. What Americans could understand, because Americans that I judge to be really worthy are religious people, and that was the basis of the anti-globalist movement. I'm Orthodox Christian. I could not judge the difference between Orthodoxy and Catholicism or Protestantism now. But what is essential, that modernity cut the roots with the sacred transcendental reality. Right. So that was reduction of the human being to be just reflection of outside world. And that was the end of Christian epistemology, that is based on recognition of eternity, of immortality of the soul, and this great inner kingdom, because the words of Christ, that the kingdom of God is inside of you, is the first and main principle of internalist epistemology. So if the kingdom of God is inside of us, so everything should be regarded from inside outside, from inside. And that is the human heart, the human being, human soul, the God, and the point of eternity in the center of our being is precisely the first and last ontological basis to consider the reality. And that was precisely that dominated before the modernity in the West, in the Western Europe. That still is the basic principle of almost all non-Western civilizations in different, not Christian understanding, but it is the same as sacred, to be sacred, to recognize this internality of the being, and this dominance of the internal and eternal
Right.
aspect of being over external and materialist. And with all that, modernity has made departure. So everything of this kind, not only just Christianity, but all the other sacred traditions were considered to be something naive, at least,
Right.
or ignorant. And that is modernity, that is progressism. And I think that why Americans as well, being totally belonging to the totally different civilization, could understand my general thesis or purposes, because you see now with this super liberal, hyper liberal new democracy with domination of perverted elite and minorities that have destroyed everything in moral and art and culture and epistemology, you see what is the logical end of the modernity. You are living through the end of the modernity, and half of America is horrified, terrorized by that, as long as I understand. So you should get deeper in the history. So America was modern creation. You have created your world, your civilization, basing on somehow on modernity, but still the basis of your of culture, and including your pragmatist approach, is something different. It is that half Christian and half pragmatist. And pragmatist philosophy, I think, I judge, is not something modern. It's something much more interesting. I have dedicated the part of my book written on American civilization, precisely to praise of pragmatism. I think that is your precious aspect of your identity, is pragmatism. But you should find alternative understanding, interpretation of pragmatism, not liberal, because pragmatism, as long as I understand Pierce, Dewey, as I understand James, it is precisely rejection of all determinist understanding of outer or inner worlds. Everything is appearing in the meeting point between inner and outer. So without any prejudices concerning some determinist processes outside or inside. It is very, very, very funny, I think. It is very interesting to put the reality in between and not inside, neither outside. And that is already, maybe it is not spiritual, but it is not materialistic, at least. It is something in between. And this identity, when is centered around encounter of the outer and the inner, is something like Heidegger, is something like Dasein, that is always in between, not only inside. So I think maybe it is not exactly our European or Russian Orthodox traditional Christian internalist vision, because we put the reality inside. But it is not yet purely materialistic, technocentric, and deterministic vision as a basis of liberal ideology and nominalism. So I think pragmatism is something that is lies between, and I think it is the way to point to start the real revolution of American mind, return to the roots, to the philosophical roots, and defend American identity against these usurpers, against these real demons of liberal globalization that are something totally different from America. America is pragmatic identity, as long as I understand. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe you could correct me, but I think everything right and left in America was pragmatist. philosophical pragmatism, romantic pragmatism of Emerson. Almost many things will be explained better if we accept this pragmatist understanding of American mind. And in that sense, we could identify the danger for it, because liberal dogmatism about how the reality is, and only liberal progressive know what is the reality, what is the good and bad, what is accepted or rejected, what is fascism, what is political correctness, what we should cancel or what we should accept and promote. For example, that is a kind of dictatorship, first of all, gnoseological dictatorship concerning inner aspect or outer the reality, technological reality. That is a kind of colonization of two realms that should be free by definition, according to American identity.
Right. Your take on pragmatism, American pragmatism, is something I haven't thought about, but that's fascinating. I've studied Dewey quite a lot, but more on his politics, which are completely counter to yours. And it's interesting that his philosophy might be consistent with yours when his politics were absolutely counter to yours. But back to modernity and sort of the roots of this problem that you're identifying here. Now, a lot of people I know would say to you, well, yes, of course, we replaced religion and God and the church with science, Professor Dugin. The difference there is that, they would say, that through science, we can know things. Speaking of epistemology, we can know and understand things. And in fact, they claim, as you know, that they can explain and understand virtually everything, including, most importantly to you, the inner life of human beings, the inner world, what you've been talking about, the interior world that you consider to be sacred and that is related to God. Whether it's related to God or not, it is something that I believe we can't know. But the Western modernists, scientists, tell us that they can know the whole world around us, but more importantly, they can know us inside of ourselves better than we can ourselves. Now, to me, and I think you might agree with this, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. To me, that might be the origin of the imperialism in Western modernity that you rail against. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. For example, I have written many books, and my last book is dedicated to the origin of Western modern science, precisely. And I try to deconstruct that. I try to show the way how it was created, because it didn't appear from nothing. It was because before modern science existed pre-modern science, Western or traditional science based on Aristotle. And I'm making in my book total restoration of the faith in Aristotle. So I think that was the great mistake and crime of the Western modern science, to abandon the principles of Aristotle, to violate them, to disregard them, to mock them, and to create anti-Aristotelian universe. So this science, this modern science, is a violent, materialistic aggression of the falsehood against the truth. I am absolutely sure, following phenomenological tradition, phenomenologists of Husserl, Heidegger, Brentano, the founding father of phenomenology, I'm following that, and I'm following phenomenological reading of Aristotle. Phenomenological reading of Aristotle is, in my opinion, the only correct one. So, according to this reading, Aristotle represented the real science, and the modern science that was created on the moment of overthrowing all the principles of Aristotle has created the false reality, and this reality was imposed on the being. And that was nothing more than the picture, the map of the reality, not the reality itself. And what is interesting, that the last century and maybe century and a half of the development of modern or super modern actual science, contemporary science, is totally in accordance with these critics of modern science. So new science is of Einstein, of Bohr, of quantum physics, more and more approaching traditional understanding. So more and more the failure, the mistakes of the beginning of this materialist mechanist world vision is clear and is transparent. So, and the public, the society, has a kind of delay to correctly interpret and read new scientific thought. So for example, quantistic physics, and above all, superstring theory, chaos theory, fractals of theory of Mandelbrot, they are much more, they correspond much to this pre-modern understanding that we think. So the vanguard science has nothing to do with this characteral materialistic mechanical science that existed in the beginning of modern science, and that is in mind of the masses, because there is a kind of a gap between vanguard scientific thought and what the masses, the science is. For example, the main authorities of modern science recognize that, for example, Heisenberg or Schrödinger or Pauli, they accept that science is nothing but projection of human mind. So that is not explanation of the reality. There is no reality. We could say that is reality, that is not reality. Science could not affirm that it has the real knowledge. It is just projection of mind. And so we need to return to the structures of mind. We need to return to the structures of soul, and we need to concentrate what is the origin of this projection and not what is outside. And these are the direct words of Heisenberg, of Pauli, of Schrödinger, of Ilya Prigozhin, of many other scientists of the first level. So the real scientists, they understand very well that science is just about human mind and nothing else. And bad scientists and masses totally ignorant in the real structure of scientific thought, scientific knowledge, scientific methods, they think it is a kind of religion. It is not religion. It is kind of organized nihilism science, and recognized as such by the best heads, best authorities of it.
How are you today? Really? Go on, take a minute, think about it. If you're feeling hyper or tired or annoyed or just meh, I think it's time to connect with your feelings by starting your mental health journey with Headspace, which I have used for 7 years. Now, we all say fine when we don't mean it. Fine isn't really an emotion, is it? How many times have you told yourself you're fine when all you've really felt is anger or sadness or nerves? Headspace is scientifically proven to help you manage your feelings and your mental health. In fact, a recent study proved in just 2 weeks, Headspace can reduce your stress by 14%. Whether you want to relieve stress and anxiety, sleep better, or improve your focus, Headspace is your everyday dose of mindfulness for real life. I've used Headspace almost every day for 7 years, and what I tell people is that every day that I meditate with Headspace is a better day. And that's real. I promise you, if you use Headspace for just 10 minutes, guaranteed you will feel better, you'll be more centered, more focused, less anxious, less stressed, and you'll be able to sleep better. watch. It's as if the chemistry in your body changes. I believe you too can better understand how you feel and improve your mental health. So I've teamed up with my friends at Headspace so you can experience it for yourself. Go to headspace.com/renegade to get the free 1-month trial that started me on my mindfulness journey. This is the best Headspace offer available, so go to headspace.com/renegade today. That's headspace.com/renegade. One of the things that I find absolutely fascinating about your thinking is that you seem to me to be simultaneously pre-modern and postmodern.
Exactly.
Okay, good. Okay. in your anti-modernism, you're an anti-modernist, but I think your sympathies are with the pre-modern, but your analysis, you derive a lot of it from the postmodern. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So it is conscious. I am pre-modern by the values concerning the main metaphysical principles, but methodologically I'm postmodern. So I think that the worst thing is modernity. So we should, I prefer to attack it from both sides, not only from progressive postmodernism. I am against leftist, hyper-materialist postmodern attitude, but I agree totally with the criticism of modernity. When postmodernists show and prove that modernity is based on nihilism or on nothing, I agree totally. But mostly postmodernists belong to left, and they want more nothing, as Gilles Deleuze has said. We should have the will to nothing. We need desire nothing. Or, for example, in Lacanian topology, where reality is nothing, reality is death. So, left postmodernists accept that and promote more nothingness, more destruction, more perversion, because modern perversion is not enough. But at least they have a great value that recognize the modernity as perversion and based on nothing. But I think this testimony of postmodernism, this methodology of deconstruction of modern narrative is very, very useful, but in the hands of traditionalists. And when traditionalists don't use this, they begin to be a kind of obsolete. So they just repeat the same thing. They just return mentally to the war we have lost. We have new wars and that are not yet lost. So we should understand the reality and take from all parts of the reality the weapons, including epistemological weapons. In that sense, Foucault, Deleuze, Lacan, Derrida, I have read all of them with great passion. So Latour is my preferred, early Latour, not actual contemporary. The beginning of Latour thought, his criticism of the modern science, I accept totally. That is great. That, for example, his book, We Never Were Modern, that is great.
This is one of the great ironies in contemporary politics, I think. So I want to tell you about myself a little bit. I was raised in a communist, Marxist, Trotskyist family, of course, atheist, and have always been around agnostics and atheists. I've never been around religious people. Consider myself a secular person. I don't really care one way or the other too much. Your commitment, I guess, to the sacred, this concept. First of all, I want to say, your postmodernist philosophers who you like so much, of course, would say that your God is a social construct. And what would you say to that?
So that is interesting. So social construct doesn't mean that we need to fragmentate it, and reduce it to individualism, because individual is as well social.
Yes, it is.
Social construct, and that is the main trick in the liberalism. They say the God is social construct. Let deconstruct it. I could agree with that. I could agree that God, as Dostoevsky has said, who has rejected his land, his earth, his people, has rejected his God. It's very important. So God is somehow related to the people, to the earth, to the culture, as well in the eyes of defenders of the religion, of conservative thinkers. So we should not say that God is totally independent from the people. He may be, but we are not independent as people, as community from God. So we are in kind of in the relation, and this relation creates our identity. So that is more or less seen from the right, the thesis of Dugin, that God is the society. According to left Dugin, the father of modern sociology, the God is society. And liberals, accepting the God as social construct, invite us to deconstruct, reduce it to individuals. But individual is social construct.
Absolutely.
So maybe let's start with the construction of individual, not with the construction of God. That is pure abstraction. Individual doesn't exist. It is pure social construct that is convention. And in order to transform this impossible convention into reality, liberalism undertakes all kind of process of liberation of individual from the religion, from nation, from sex, from gender, in order to achieve something inachievable. To find individual, it is to find, to search individuum, is to be in search of infinitesimal, infinitely small quantity that is always evading. And more we reduce in this pursuit of individual, more we pursue this abstraction, this social construct, the more we approach to nothing. And this, for example, the new liberalism is inviting us to reduce individual to sub-individual aspects, to regard the individual as a kind of artificial machine that we should improve, that we should change some part. So I don't want to challenge the concept that God is social construction, maybe, but we could choose, and we are free, being human, to choose the social construct of wholeness, of God, of something integral as the main principle, or something opposite, or infinitely big, that the summum bonum as God is, or infinitely small as individual. Both things are just the limits, but they are going in the opposite direction. We could be in the pursuit of God that is always evading to coming higher in apophatical theology, or we could be in the pursuit of the infinitely small individual that is evading as well, but approaching more and more the matter, the nothingness. So to accept that both things are social construct doesn't mean that we should absolutely, in the totalitarian way, choose individual. That is why I'm a demon. So I'm seducing the people not to just defending old-fashioned objection, but I agree that gender is social construct. It is not something biological, because I don't believe in biology, but I think we could choose to stay man as man, the woman a woman, family of children, traditional, and that is the choice based on sacredness, based on our decision, and we should defend our decision that we are making.
That makes a lot of sense to me. You so the modern Western liberal wants to, as you said, free us in quotes from God, from the church, from the land we live on, from our gender, from our race. But I think what you mean is they want to free us from history. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. They because postmodern openly affirms that the history is a kind of great narrative that serves to ruling classes to continue exploitation and so on and so on. But the history, it is something that creates us. So we need to free the liberals. Wants to liberate, to free us from ourselves. And pursuing the pure individuality is pursuing is a kind of devastating the cleaning of all the inner content, including language, tradition, all kind of identity. That is mass destruction. I think that liberalism is genocide, is philosophical, cultural, technological, and social genocide.
Yes.
And that is conscious. They know what they do because they are maniac, they belong to the anti-church, and they're pursuing their agenda notwithstanding any objection. They don't think, they just do. So they are possessed, I think. So when we are dealing with liberals, we are dealing with possessed people. They are demonically possessed. They don't accept any objection. They could not accept arguments. They don't argue anymore. Before it was the case. First age or old age liberals were different. I agree. Comparing with communists, with fascists, they were a real representative of the freedom, but not now. New liberals are totally different. They don't tolerate any kind of discussion. That they become totalitarian. That's a certain totalitarianism, and it is worse. Not because it is worse in theory, but it is worse than communist or fascist totalitarianism because it is ruling. It is present. We have no fascist regime, almost no communist regime, but we have liberal regime everywhere, and that is why the liberal totalitarianism is worse, because it exists now, because it is something we're living inside. So comparing with other regimes when they existed, I could recognize some advantages of liberalism, but not now. Now all the masks are off, and we see, as Hannah Arendt has shown, that totalitarianism is not about Middle Ages. Totalitarianism is modern phenomenon. Yep. It is modern. That is why it is a part of communism, part of fascism, but it is why totalitarianism is the part of liberalism. And that is why Hannah Arendt has helped Heidegger to escape, to be judged and maybe executed by this new liberal totalitarianism.
Yes, I agree entirely. I don't know if the audience will, though. How are the great atrocities of the 20th century, Nazism, communism, etc., how are they modern to you? How are those modern phenomena? Because, of course, there's a big argument about this among political scientists. Many argue that they're pre-modern phenomena. Some, like you and me, argue differently. But to you, what's the argument from your perspective on why those things, the worst things in history, basically, were modern?
So, in my opinion, in the 20th century, all three main political theory, main political ideologies were totally modern. But they were modern in different proportions. And two world wars and all the political process of the 20th century was a kind of race who is most modern than other. That was the big fight when Nietzsche for modernity. When once Nietzsche has said that I see the future when the main wars, will be dedicated to ideas. That will be the clash of ideas. Nobody believed him. Everybody thought in the terms of material resources, national interests, and egoistic interests of nation. But when we look back to the 20th century now, knowing everything we know, we see that the main political, the main wars, main conflict, the main content of the world politics was the fight for the who is more modern. Liberals, communists, and fascists, who represent yesterday and who represent tomorrow. Because all three modern political ideologies pretended to be tomorrow, to bring tomorrow. Fascists as well, that is why they were modern, and that is why Heidegger has criticized in Black Quaderni, Neri, and black books, black blocknotes, has criticized National Socialism because of the modernity. So I think the 20th century was fight for ideas. Who is more modern than other, and who was in the reality less modern. And the result of 20th century is a kind of balance. It is a kind of summary of it. So we know, it is conclusion. In conclusion, so we know now everything. We know everything about modernity. So the liberalism has won, and that is the proof that liberalism is more modern and was more modern from the beginning. Second, communism was much more modern than fascism, but less modern than liberalism. So in communism, we should identify something traditional and pre-modern. And that was the case of National Bolshevism. National Bolshevik reading of Soviet experience by Michael Agursky and by some Russian National Bolshevists, as Ustrialov, was precisely that, to interpretation of the Soviet phenomena as continuation, hidden and not implicit, not explicit, not open, continuation of Russian collectivist and sacred identity. So there is a kind of interpretation of second political theory, communism, as something modern and pre-modern. And the failure in the Cold War was precisely the kind of confirmation. And fascism has fallen before. It was openly much more pre-modern. It was modern, but not enough. And that is why it has failed. After that, communism. And now we are dealing with the pure modernity, liberalism in new form, totalitarian, globalist, sub-individualistic, totally crazy, as Biden, Kamala Harris, Soros, Bill Gates, all this big finance, big pharma, this controlling society with small elite. I have all that is the pure modernity. I have spoken with Francis Fukuyama about democracy. He had said to me in one conversation on TV, in Canadian TV, that old democracy was the rule of majority, and new democracy is the rule of minorities directed against majority. So that is official and formal recognition of the essence of the modern liberalism. The minorities are in power, are fighting against against majority.
Right.
So that is the gap, the abyss between elites and the society, and that is the last modernity, last turn of modernity, and I think we are approaching the end of it, or with the global catastrophe, or with the great revolution of the reality against this hallucination that represents the modern global power.
So I want to go back to the 20th century. That was quite an analysis of the three major regimes of the 20th century: liberalism, fascism, and communism. And I think you're right. If you look at certainly the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, you'll see the three always competing about which of them was more industrialized, which of them was more efficient, which of them was more scientific and rational, which of them was more developed, all in modern ways. These are all modern, right, standards. So the modernity was the standard for all three regimes. And it produced the greatest killing fields in human history.
Exactly.
A couple of years ago, I moved to another state. And when I got here, I didn't have a doctor. And I hate looking for doctors. I don't know how to do it. And I wish I had had ZocDoc at the time. But you can have ZocDoc right now if you need a doctor. Go to ZocDoc.com/renegade and download their app right now. It's the easiest way to find a great doctor and instantly book an appointment. With ZocDoc, you can search for local doctors who take your insurance. You can read verified patient reviews of them, and you can even book an appointment in person or by video chat right there. Never wait on hold again with a receptionist. Whether you need a primary care physician, a dentist, a dermatologist, psychiatrist, eye doctor, or any other specialist, ZocDoc has you covered. So go to ZocDoc.com/renegade and download the ZocDoc app to sign up for free. Every month, millions of people use ZocDoc, and I'm one of them. It's my go-to whenever I need to see a doctor. ZocDoc finally makes healthcare easy. Now is the time to prioritize your health. Go to ZocDoc.com/renegade and download the ZocDoc app to sign up for free and book a top-rated doctor. Many are available as soon as today. That's ZocDoc.com/renegade. A lot of people learn about you in this country and in the West. First, they hear that you are opposed to certain things that we all love, right? We hear that you're opposed to democracy, you're opposed to feminism, you're opposed to gay rights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do you want to, I think I know what your major argument is about that, but do you want to take those on individually, or do you want to group them together and talk about them? There's these sort of totems of the Western liberal mind, right? These are the things that no one can question, but you straight up counter them. You oppose them outrightly. Do you want to talk about them as a group or individually go through them?
So first of all, I oppose that as universal norms.
Right.
So I'm not opposed to democracy. I don't oppose homosexuals or feminism. More than that, I think that on the theoretical or individual level, I don't oppose nothing from that. But for example, I'm making choice inside of democracy, some kind of democracy, and the democracy on the certain level I recognize for us, for example, a democracy in the kind of some on the level of the village and self autonomy of small and organic community. And I think that coming with representative democracy, from stepping outside of direct democracy, we are coming to political manipulation and alienation of real democracy. So I'm in favor of Rousseau rather than for representative parliamentarian democracy. Okay. Concerning feminism, I think there I separate liberal feminism from standpoint feminism. I am in favor of standpoint feminism. I think men's universe and women's universe are different, and female universe was misrated underrated during the history, and that is great failure. I think it somehow it continued, but we need to recognize the place of female universe, and with all its dignity. We should not judge by ourselves. We should love and cherish and respect this sovereignty of feminine mind and feminine soul. And we should not, female soul, we should not impose our only male principles as universal. It is not so. And concerning homosexuals, I think that I somehow don't like that aesthetically, or because I'm in favor of traditional family, but the thing happened. Many, for example, the sin happens, and we will, if we insist too much that we reject this kind of sin and we accept the other kind of sin, so it is just hypocrisy. So I consider it to be sin as the other sins. And if we are Christian, we should repent. We should try to avoid, but we are sinners.
Oh, I see.
And so that is my opinion. But what I really reject in the formal way, that universality or obligation to our Russian society that is completely different at any price, except to turn into a homosexual country, to promote liberal feminism, or to install liberal representative democracy as the must, as something, as the standard. So it is not the standard. It the kind of sub-product of Western history, and we could make a kind of separation. Something is very sympathical, something is totally awful and abhorrent. For example, homosexual marriages, legalization of incest, and other form of liberal perversions. But it is up to you to accept that or reject. The only thing that I formally and strongly reject, if it is your values, keep it by yourself and don't impose it on us. We are different. We have the family. We totally prohibit the sins, for example, homosexuality, as other sins. So we don't want to formal criterion of liberal feminism that is that tries either to identify woman as man, that is perversion, other perversion, or as Donna Haraway insists that we need to destroy all genders in order to get to real equality of the robots. And that is techno-feminism. And when some emissaries, some people from the West come to us and say, you should accept that. That's the only progressive way of the culture, of the politics, of the art. We have all the right to get them by ear and to throw them out of Russia to their other territories where they are free to promote everything they want. If your society, if my dear pragmatic, old-fashioned America accept that, it is up to you to decide. If you don't accept that, we would support your decision, but it is but that is option. So that is friendly or unfriendly gesture. But what concerns us, so border, our Russian border, or the border of, it is the border not only of country, but of civilization. Here on this border, obligatory homosexuality, liberal feminism, or liberal representative democracy should stop. Should stop. We could accept or choose democracy, but we could not. When I say to liberals, we could choose not democracy, that's all. Yeah, you are fascist demon. So because you think, or liberals think they are promoter of universal values. That fits to you, that fits to us, and there is no other solution. If we say democracy optional, just optional is the end of any kind of discussion. But that is pure imperialism, pure hegemony. That is pure totalitarian universalism that obliges everybody, all cultures, all people, all civilization to accept only one truth. But that is scandalous. That is why not only myself, but all our people, or our society, our president, and our army, that's important elements, nuclear army rejects this pretension of universality of gay rights. Exactly. We're not against gays, including we are not against gays' right. We are for the absolutely free possibility to accept or reject any value. So in our territory. So in our country, it's one level of the reality. Outside, something else. That's my position.
Do you? What do you think is the first thing that most Americans learned about Vladimir Putin? What do you think What do you think the first thing they found out about him was? What do you think?
I think that
they were told about him. What was the first thing that they were told about Vladimir Putin?
So they're told that he has
homophobic. He's anti-gay.
No, he's made Russia back to the history. Russia is back, and that is the bad news. He is homophobic. He is conservative. He is totalitarian, authoritarian. But the main thing, I think, that how the West conceives Mr. Putin, that he has put Russia back. And when Russia is here, and everything is already put to some limits. So that is greatest obstacle, as during the Second World War, Cold War, during Russian Empire. The Russia is keeper of the alternative order.
Yes.
And that is katekontic mission, katechonon, Greek word, that's something who keeps and not doesn't let to reality to fall into the abyss. So this Putin has restored this katekontic identity of Russia, and that is why the alternative power is mad, is crazy against him. He is depicted as monster, and I think as well as I'm happy to be demon for them. I think Putin is totally happy to be monster to globalists.
I can tell you, though, that I think it was just before the Sochi Olympics that there was a media campaign in the United States directed by the Democratic Party to depict Putin primarily as an anti-gay bigot. There was a massive campaign for a good year, and most American liberals who are not highly educated, that's what they first knew about Vladimir Putin, was that he was anti-gay. And I think that basically proves your thesis, Professor Dugin, because they were weaponizing essentially this idea of, universal values and, the embrace of homosexuality being one of them, right? And they're putting that forward and saying, well, Putin is the one who's not going along with this. Putin is the one person who's not going along with this, and that's why he must be removed, is what the Clintons said and have always said. But they use things like gay rights and feminism as the justification because most Americans don't care about NATO. They don't care about geopolitics. They care about these abstractions for some reason or another. But that's what was used to attempt to dislodge Putin by the liberal regime here. That's why I brought that up.
I agree, but we need to get deeper, I think, why this obligatory homosexuality. That is not so easy. So, because the people who promote homosexuality very frequently are not homosexuals themselves, and that is ideological, and ideological basis for that. That is continuation of this pursuit of pure individual, because individuality is the freedom from any kind of collective identity. That was from the beginning, from the collective identity rejection by Protestants of Catholic Church. That was collective identity. This collective rejection of collective identity of the empire. Reducing all the politics to sovereign national states. That was beginning of the Westphalian system. After that, rejecting of collective identity, nation. So nation consists from individual citizens, and so citizens could create or destroy the society because they are first. So this rejection of national collective identity. And when communism was collective identity, after the victory of communism, that was gender politics. It began in the rise of gender politics coincides with the end of communism, because now the liberals, after the victory, over all other kind of collective identity, racial and kind of fascist, statist, nationalist, communist, proletarian, religious, Catholic, imperial, and so on, they have remarked that still in the Western liberal progressive society there are two kinds of collective identity, female and male. Wow. And that is collective identity. So they were obliged to make the gender question optional as was the religious, national, race, and so on. So that is, I think, that pure ideology, nothing to do with homosexuals as a kind of some deviation of some people, nothing to do. That is idea to impose in this as the absolute truth that every collective and identity, including sexual one, is the optional. So it is individual who decides. That is promotion. That's the same pursuit of individuality. That is, but it is not enough. Transgender against gays, robots against still human transgenders. So we have the other horizons of the progressism, and it is not all. It is not the end. Homosexuality is just a moment in this agenda of liberalism. Tomorrow it will be post-human species, artificial intelligence, robots, cyborgs, and who is against cyborgs and pretends that humans are different from cyborgs should be judged as Nazis, they should be punished and cancelled. So already in films, there is a kind of anticipation of this humans, for example, the serious humans. There's anticipation of the political tomorrow, of political structure of tomorrow's liberalism. And for example, today Putin is demonized because he is against gays. That is not so important for him, I think. No. But tomorrow's other Russian leader will be demonized because he denies the equality between human and post-human species. And with the same indignation of New York Times and Washington Post and CNN, that is the direct line and till the approaching end and collapse of all that.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about collective identities. So I think your argument is brilliant that liberals attempt to, quote, liberate or cut off people from their collective identities, like gender identities, like national identities, like religious identities. I think in part, and I don't think you've really said this directly, but to me, it's in part because it makes them easier to control. A person who is not rooted in their community, in their history, in their locality, in their identity, is easier to control, is going to be more subject to the winds of change, right? But now there are some collective identities, Professor Dugin, that I've heard you say, you oppose the establishment of them because they're imposed on people. I'm thinking of race, right? The categories of race that have been imposed on people. They've been forced to be black or white or Slav or whatever it is. And you've called yourself an anti-racist, or at least that you said you're opposed to racism. Why is it bad to be cut off from one's collective identity if it's national or religious, but why is it not? But it is good to be cut off from your racial identity.
Good question. First of all, I would like to say that race identity and class identity in the communism are the product of the modernity. They are artificial. So there was a kind of individual artificial identity that was liberal, the main principle. And there was two alternative opposing artificial identity that represented nothing at all in the traditional sacred pre-modern reality, race and class, because the class didn't exist before the modernity, before the capitalism. There was different estates, and the relations between them was totally different. That was not just exploitation. That was not just about the material. There was a much more sophisticated structure. So to answer your question, I would say I am in favor of organic, traditional, historical identity. Historical and not artificial. Yep. So I am in favor of pre-modern collective identity, and I think I consider to be man and to be woman, it is to belong to this pre-modern collective identity, because that was in the sacred scripture, that was in our pre-modern political and social structure, and we should explore them more, and in order to discover once more, rediscover female universe, we need to get to pre-modern societies. For example, for some institutions that existed in ancient Greece and in Roman tradition and other countries. So in the past of our civilization, we could find the keys to real problems, and many things that seem to us to be traditional, to get to us from the long past, are very modern. They came with capitalism. They came with modernity. And that looks as well old. But we should make a difference between the real old age, pre-modernity, and just old modernity. That was the beginning and the source of all the failures and the problems we are dealing with.
Brilliant. Yes, I can confirm that race is a modern construct. And now that you say it, of course, class is too. I mean, it begins with capitalism, Marxism, and absolutely. Quite brilliant. As an entrepreneur and the head of a startup, I love that sound. It's the sound of another sale on Shopify, which is the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business that I totally recommend. Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources once reserved for big business, so upstarts, startups like mine, and established businesses alike can sell everywhere. They can synchronize online and in-person sales, and they can effortlessly stay informed. Scaling your business is a journey of endless possibility, which is what I'm finding out with Renegade University in my use of Shopify. Believe me, this podcast started out selling nothing, and today we are selling products from some of the biggest companies in the country. And we're not stopping there, because success is a million milestones on a forever evolving path. I love how Shopify has the tools and resources that make it easy for any business of any size to succeed from down the street to around the globe. Like mine, Shopify powers millions of businesses from first sale to full scale. You can reach customers online and across social networks with an ever-growing suite of channel integrations and apps, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and more. You can gain insights as you grow with detailed reporting of conversion rates, profit margins, and beyond. More than a store, Shopify grows with you. This is possibility, powered by Shopify. So go to shopify.com/renegade, that's all lowercase, and get this, for a free 14-day trial and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. So grow your business with Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/renegade right now. That's shopify.com/renegade. Okay, let's talk about, last thing on this point here, human rights. You very famously or infamously talked about human rights. And again, it's a similar argument, but you're opposed to human rights, in quotes, as a universal norm, right? Or the attempt to impose Western ideas of human rights as a universal value. Is that right?
Exactly. This is the human rights. The same thing, absolutely, as promotion of homosexual marriages.
Yeah,
so
right.
That is pure construction, because if you are dealing only with modern Western liberal understanding of what is human. So if the human is individual, so it is individuals' rights. And if you get deeper in this concept, you see that politically it is directed against citizenship. So that the human rights theory opposes the human individual to the citizen, and defends a kind of natural human individual opposed to national states. And just the tool of globalization, just political manipulation, and nothing else. No moral, no serious understanding of human nature, no asking about what the human is, but what is human. It is not easy question, but liberals know already the answer. They know everything because they totally maniacs. They follow their cult, their crazy totalitarian cult that is sect, the globalist. And the human rights theory is the weapon of this sect, because what we Russian consider to be human is different from what Biden or Kamala Harris thinks. So we don't think that human being could exist without collective identity, without the roots, without its relation. The Muslims, all the billion of Muslims, couldn't accept humanity without relation to God, for example. And we are cancelled, you are cancelled, you are fanatics, you are Putins, you are fascists. So only Kamala Harris and Biden, including the half of American population supporting Trump's, are not human. You are not human because you don't believe individuality in homosexual marriage and defend your obsolete identity. So that is everything is quite coherent on the side of liberals. And for example, they defend only those humans who fit in their concept. All who don't fit in their individualistic understanding, they are not human, for example. And that is why crimes of American occupation of Iraq, of Afghanistan, this killing of civilians is nothing. The hundreds, thousands of innocent people killed by you today in the 21st century is nothing. But if Putin has put unknown person with name Navalny into the jail for some time, it is just something terrible. Mm-hmm. So that is pure hypocrisy and pure manipulation. That is immoral to speak about human rights on the wave of the globalists. We need to find new terms and new theories. For example, the right of the people, the right of the cultures, people's right, yes. Culture's right, yes. So state have no need. States have no need to have right, because there is a kind of international law. So, but peoples have no juridical definition. So I think I prefer to fight for people's right first.
So it's fascinating that you are simultaneously for a form of collectivism, right? National identity, communal identity, civilizational identity, I suppose. But you're also very much for the diversity,
Yes.
pluralism. You're for
Absolutely.
you're essentially for the freedom of communities, I suppose, to express themselves, to determine themselves. So it's an interesting, I don't know if that's paradoxical or not, but it's interesting. You're both, right, a collectivist, but it's sort of an you're an anti-globalist collectivist.
Anti-globalist, absolutely. Anti-globalist and collectivist. And you know, there is a very interesting German philosopher, Carl Schmitt, who has introduced the concept of pluriversum, against universum, pluriversum. He applied that to the states, but I would like to apply it in a broader context. For example, and according to Schmitt, the meaning, the sense of the state is only then when there is other states outside of it, and the relation between them creates the texture, the kind of the reality of international life. So one collective has sense when there is the other, and when the other and the relation with other is absolutely positive. Positive not because there could not be conflict, they could, but because the other forms us and we form the other. And the real collective identity is imaginable and conceivable only in plural understanding, that we are, that they are the other. And the other should not be exactly like us or worse. They just other. That is what the West doesn't understand, that the other can be something different from be exactly the same or worse.
Well, no. What the West doesn't understand is that the other can be respected.
Yes. But I respect it not as such as ourselves, and not as something that we are trying to become exactly like us. So that is only ethnocentrism of the West, but of the West in politics, not in the Western science, because Western anthropology of Franz Boas, of Claude Lévi-Strauss are genial. They were genius because the Western anthropological science is pluralistic. It invites to get to empathically understand the other, but the Western politics is quite opposite. It is pure racism, liberal racism, that measure the other by themselves, himself, or itself, and if there is difference, the other isn't exactly as ourselves. We should make it much more similar, but that is pure racism, assimilationism, but Western anthropological tradition is, on the contrary, very good. And I am a great fan of Lévi-Strauss and Boas and all the American anthropology, because American anthropology is quite opposite to American politics. It is really open and it is really brilliant.
Franz Boas and his students introduced the concept of cultural relativism, which you employ, which you need, right, for your work. Yes. So talk about a little bit. You have talked about what you call the cultural racism of Western hegemony, of Western, I guess, modernity, Western liberalism against, well, as you've just been saying, against all the others. Putin is maybe the most famous other recently. Trump, you could say, and his supporters are others these days, but there is an annihilationist um, attitude toward the other. We must either convert them totally through assimilation or remove them through war.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that is, for example, including so-called critical racist theory.
Mm-hmm.
It is just racism. Yep. It is the racism, hypocritical, and I think that slavery based on race is modern phenomenon. It's absolutely modern. It's not just continuation of the old age, dark ages. It was created in the beginning of the modernity. After the creator have repented, but they are still the same racist inside, and now they try to impose to some absolutely innocent cultures that never practiced slavery as American, that they are worse and still worse than yourself. And for example, we Russians, we had never slavery based on race and slavery as such. After the coming of Christianity, but we are blamed to be worse than that. Or for example, the main problem with Afro-American, that they are victim of total loss of cultural collective identity. And above all in the Northern Hemisphere, Northern America, because in Southern America, sometimes the slaves were settled as communities. And so they had conserved something, some cultural, religious, traditional identity, but not in the North America, where they were consciously separated from one of the other, but they belonged to different tribes, to different cultures. They had rights, they were human, and they were considered to be individuals. So that is the liberal crime, to consider the man as individual. They started with the slaves, and after that they applied the same for everybody. Everybody became the slave individual. Easy to manipulate, as you have said. Yeah. I agree with that. So, but I think that the problem with Afro-American, that they need to rediscover their own collective identity. It is very difficult after 300 years of conscious genocide, cultural genocide. And instead, to improve, to repent from this universalist attitude of the modernity, they blame Putin. Putin is as well responsible for slave trade and something like that. But that is typically for the West. I think the problem of master-slave relation is the problem of the core of Western civilization, and it should be revised. It should be rethought. It is not easy to solve. For example, some kind of hierarchy should exist in the society, but not basing on the skin, on the culture. It should be something totally different, and basing on the capacities, basing on the structure of souls, because there are contemplative souls that should be put as the clergy, as kind of philosophers and Platonians. There are military people born like that, or educated like that, and they should fulfill their function. And that is peaceful worker population that should be respected as such, and not basing on the skin or money. So I think the money should be should be put on the third level. So modern civilization, modernity is obsessed with money. So it is everything, but it's just a mean. It should be reduced in all this. All in money institution are the great bubble that destroys the real economy, the process of work to produce, to create. They are totally parasite. So I think that modern financial civilization is absolutely evil. But if you think otherwise, you have totally right to promote that in the boundaries and the limits that are natural for Western civilization. But we have different understanding of role of money, of democracy, and so on. But concerning this problem of Afro-Americans, I think it is very, very serious, and you could not easily solve it. It demands the honest understanding. But it is not just political manipulation. Oh, let us use this factor in order to overcome Trump. It is humiliating for the Afro-Americans when they were used, and after that put away by Biden. Pure racist, I think. Supported by neoconservatives of the worst kind. So it is just the worst. And for Afro-American society, from white Americans, for everybody.
So a lot of my work is on the American Civil War and Reconstruction, which followed the Civil War. And that story, as I tell it, is very much an Alexander Dugin story, I think. So as it goes, I mean, most historians now of the United States agree that slaves, once they got here, developed their own distinctive culture, which was neither African nor American, right? And then after the Civil War, though, with Reconstruction, this is where your analysis fits perfectly. What happened was they filled the South with schools. 2,000 schools were established by the North, by the Northern imperialists, essentially. In which they trained the ex-slaves to do what? To speak with the proper New England accent, to dress properly, the way that New England men and women dressed, to work in factories, with industrial discipline, to get married and have a nuclear family the way that good white Northerners did, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was an act of pure imperialism. And that's why I have said that the South was the original Afghanistan. So it does make a lot of sense there, but it's a little more complicated than I think you're describing it in terms of the history of African Americans. But that attempt to assimilate them coercively and to make them universal subjects fits exactly with your thesis. Exactly.
So nobody asked them. Nobody asked them what they wanted.
Right.
Everybody was decided outside of them, and now the globalists once more decided what Afro-Americans want. So that is the Freudian problem, what a woman wants. So that is the question that is very, very suspicious in the mouth of the man. It is just already something incorrect and something very special. So what Afro-Americans want should first of all ask, and not to say we know what they want. They want Biden and not Trump. But that is ridiculous. And the same thing in the history you have said after you have told after the victory of the North and the Civil War. So everybody knew in the North what African wants. They want to be exactly like whites, but that is pure racism, I think. Pure racism.
Exactly.
To make the other exactly like you and deciding for the other is pure racism.
Pure racism.
Nobody asked what you want, who you are, what is your identity, what is your will. Because they were slaves or ex-slaves, they considered to have no identity. entity, no will, no subject. So that is the problem. That is the art to recognize the subject of other, the other as subject, not just object. And that is challenge. And for example, in religious life, Protestant community of early American settlers, they were solving this pluralism, and the state system is a kind of effort to solve this problem of old English domination of the hierarchy, and that was interesting, but it was not overcome totally. And regarding Afro-Americans, the old hierarchy or old racism, old exploitation was revealed. So, but I think that I am totally in favor to support the absolutely legitimate claim for Afro-American to have their own identity, but it is not easy. And that is where we should invest our time, our efforts, in order to know more about African society, about African states, about African culture. I have dedicated to African civilization 2 books, two volumes. So coming to starting the work, I recognized that it will be easy. It is just archaic tribes, as for example in the Amazon Indians, but nothing of the sort. Nothing. I have discovered in Africa the big great empire, the different culture, dialectic between cults. So such richness of differences, it is the real world. Or some few universes merged between themselves, nothing to do with modern post-colonial states. So, but that was the big discovery for myself, that I have discovered the African world. And I'm absolutely sure that nobody among the liberals know anything about such reality as African identity and African identities, African ontologies. Sure. But without that, they could not speak with Afro-American, because they are dealing with caricatures. Because just to be black, it is enough. It is not enough, because black doesn't mean anything. Africa is black, but it's totally different from totally different. And it is not why this identity is artificial, in my opinion, because that says nothing about the real content, the real meaning of the culture. To be black is not enough. To be white is not enough. Sure. That does say absolutely nothing.
Certainly. I guess I want to finish by talking a little bit more about more contemporary politics, and in particular Russia. So some people might say, some people have said, that you are contradictory in simultaneously being a champion of diversity and pluralism and multiplicity, and letting a million flowers bloom, etc., different cultures, respecting all the different cultures in the world, while you also call for the reunification of the former Soviet Union, the Soviet republics. You want, in particular, Ukraine, you want them to be reunified with Russia under Russia's terms. Am I right? Is that a contradiction with your commitment to diversity?
So, for example, if we live in the void, for example, Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, I would defend rather Ukrainian identity. So, in the void. But now we are living in the geopolitically organized world, where something that get out of Russia comes to our enemies, to globalists, to Atlanticists, and in that makes a kind of contradiction. But I think that Slavic, Orthodox, very close to us population should live in our civilization, but in common civilization, not in Russian civilization. Because Ukrainians, they are as well Russians, but not Russians like us. You know, in Russian language, there are three names: Russian, Great Russian, Small Russian, and White Russian. Mm-hmm. So once that was one Eastern Slavic people, Russians. And after that, we have separated in three branches. And what we are calling frequently Russian means sometimes Muscovite, the Great Russian, Великороссы, not Russian in general. That creates confusion. And Ukrainians are Russian and with the same basis as ourselves. Mm-hmm. But we and Belarusian, White Russian, they as well are Russians, totally Russians, but third branch. So I am in favor of unification of these three Russian branches, not on the condition of Great Russians, but conserving identity of Small Russian, White Russian in the if you want, pan-Russian civilization. Okay. And that obtains additional element when it depends, from that depends our possibility to defend our geopolitical identity and geopolitical independence. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if we consider the multipolarity, when America is occupying, as Trump suggested, Washington is occupying by in domestic problem, Europe is concerned by its own problem, Islamic world is led by themselves. So maybe independent Ukraine could be tolerated and accepted. But at the same time, Ukraine is artificial modern creation. This state exists only 30 years and is created by the chance from two people, the Eastern Ukrainians and Western Ukrainians. Mm-hmm. And Western Ukrainians are against Russia, Great Russia, against Moscow, and Eastern Ukraine is historically for Russia, because this part, Eastern Ukraine, was peopled by Great Russians during Tsarist time, and that was taken not from Ukraine. Ukraine didn't exist, never existed. But from Turks, that was Ottoman empires, and Russia fighting against Turks. Russia, Tsarist Russia, has obtained this territory and peopled with its own population. And after that, we have conquered from Poland the Ukrainian population and Belarusian population. So we have liberated them, and but they never existed as nations, as states. Mm-hmm. So half of Ukraine is pro-Russian and half of Ukraine is anti-Russian. The West supports only anti-Russian identity that create inner tensions, and Russia came to help this Eastern Ukraine. So, but at the same time, I'm advocate of Ukrainian identity. I'm radically against great Russian nationalism, great Russian hegemony, and I think that we need to create, if we liberate once Ukraine, we should create new state. We should not be the modern Russian state. We should create new kind of civilizational entity, or uniting the people, Slavic people, and not Slavic as well, Turk and other, in the context of the geopolitical great space. And that will be a kind of pole of multipolar world, living peaceful and harmoniously with other poles. So there should not be two poles. Already there are three poles: China, Russia, and the West. But I think that Europe should represent a specific pole, North America. Other pole, South America. The next one, Africa, should be created as great multi-pluralistic civilization. And I have many Pan-Africanist friends. So the same with China, the same with India, the same with Islamic world. So my ideas spread step by step through different cultures, and I think that precisely that is against this demonization in the West. Maybe this perverted image helps a little bit, because in publicity the worst thing is to be totally unknown.
That's right.
To be demonized is the first step to acknowledgement.
That's right. All news is good news. Last question for you. What do you think of Donald Trump?
I think that was extremely interesting phenomenon, because I never would suspect that in the United States of America could appear the leader like that, because half of his agenda coincides with mine. So half. So, for example, America first, good tradition, good idea to let the other to develop as they want. So, political realism, good. Paleoconservatism, good. The stop of globalization, good. The rupture, the stopping relations with neoconservative and paleoconservatism, nice. So I think that he was pragmatist. He was led by principle. It works. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. But that is brilliant. That coincides. It is totally different kind of mentality than ours. But I had and I have a real sympathy for Trump, not because he is similar. Not because he's not to speak about identical with us, but because he is much better than his opponent, because he has mobilized American consciousness concerning the main issues of the history, and I think he was the only new American president that didn't start a new war. So I think that is he deserves really the Nobel Prize of Peace much more than Obama, and not to speak about Biden. Biden is real catastrophe. But I think that in order to understand my relation to Trump, you need to remember my understanding of differences. So it is totally different. He is totally different. His idea, many of his, for example, I don't share his Islamophobia. I'm not. I don't agree with him with his pro-Israeli politics. But because you could be pro-Israel, could be anti-Israel, but at the same time, his anti-Chinese position. I don't think anti-communism. His anti-communism. I think it is weird. But at the same time, many things I like in Trump, but I think he fits much more than anybody else to what America needs. That he's much more realistic. He intuitively understands the changes in the world much better than this paranoid globalist and Democrats. Democrats today are totally crazy. They have no reality check. They are impossible. They could not make it. And maybe business background of Trump has taught him to make reality check. What is that works, that doesn't work, and to adjust and adapt the reality. So his realism, that is very, very, very useful. He was not pro-Russian. That is totally that is absolutely lie. He wasn't pro-Russian. He wasn't too much in favor of Putin. So he was American patriot. And I think maybe to deal with him would be really more difficult than with Biden, because Biden is some creature we shouldn't respect, we shouldn't take in consideration. That is crazy, crazy old sectarian globalist, and Trump was subject. And Biden's America is just a threat. And Trump's America could be dangerous partner, I would say. Always dangerous, but could be in some situation ally or partner.
Interesting, very interesting. Thank you for that. Are you currently allowed to visit here?
No, I'm under sanctions. I'm under American and Canadian sanctions because of my position during Russian Spring in Crimea. I didn't participate in the war. I didn't help financially. I'm sanctioned maybe for the first time in the modern history for my views, for my words, not for my deeds. So I never visited Crimea during this situation. So I was totally outside of the reality of Russian Spring in the physical sense, but I was and I am advocate of unification of our countries between Ukraine and Russia. I wasn't so much in favor of unification of Crimea. I would prefer to liberate Ukraine, or at least the half of Ukraine, and create some special state, Eastern Ukraine state, different from us and different from Western Ukraine. That was Novorossiya. So my position was much more differentiated. This was not just total support of Putin's actions. To some of them, I was very critical, but I was censored and cancelled from YouTube, from Gmail, including from Twitter, put under sanctions. I'm prohibited to come to America, and many other things, just for words, for ideas. And that means how really important words are and ideas are.
It also proves your thesis again that the West claims to be for openness, but they are sanctioning you for ideas and words.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
They're for forced coercion. I mean, so for coerced assimilation. And until you assimilate, Professor Dugin, until your ideas comport with theirs, you will be punished, right?
Well, when I was once in the United States, in Washington, I have met Brzezinski, and he has dedicated the book of him, The Great Change or something like that, with desire to Mr. Dugin to change his idea into the opposite. That's all. You accept everybody, but he stops to be different from you. That is, I have this book. It's the kind of I think the kind of example of pure racist mentality. Stop, be yourself.
Are you going to change your mind ever? Are you going to ever be westernized?
I don't know. I think I am fascinated by Western culture more than Western. Western. So I am so Western. For example, I many years I studied Heidegger, Nietzsche, Plato, Aristotle, Middle Ages, Thomas d'Aquinas, and Hegel, Fichte, Kant. I know much better Western culture than I think more than many Russian liberals and Westerners. I am not Westerner, but some aspect of Western culture I really admire, and I have studied. I have written many books on that. And it is impossible to be more Westerner than myself to being Russian patriot and Slavophile and defender of our special identity.
Well, I hope that one day I can meet you in America. I hope that makes that possible.
With great pleasure.
Great.
With Trump or with American Revolution or with some other suspected events, it could be possible.
However we can make it happen. Professor Dugin, it's been a great honor and a pleasure, and thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for invitation. Best wishes, and I hope we could continue relations in the future.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. Thank you, sir.
Best wishes.
Bye-bye. This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. To join the new Renegade University, go to renegadeuniversity.com. To join the new Unregistered Underground, the supporting listeners group for the podcast, go to unregisteredunderground.com. Thanks for listening.